Hi there and welcome back to our Life Sciences Grade 12 CAP series. I'd like to thank you for tuning in and I hope to make life sciences as simple as possible for you. Right, so in this video we'll be looking at the menstrual cycle, and I do remember in the last video that I did not give you the full explanation or description of the spermatogenesis, and so in this video we will do so, and we'll also take a look at the development of the fetus after fertilization. Okay, so let's get on to it, guys. Right, so first things first, you have to know the definition of the menstrual cycle and its purpose, okay? If you know the definition and its purpose, it will be easy for you to understand all the process, all the hormones that take part in this, and all the structure that develop to support this cycle. So simply, the menstrual cycle is a 28-day reproductive cycle in the females involving the changes in the ovary and uterus. So essentially, the menstrual cycle is a cycle that has a purpose of preparing the female body for possible pregnancy or for possible fertilization. Okay, we rather use possible fertilization. How do we prepare the female's body for possible fertilization? We do so firstly by producing egg cells. Okay, remember, in order for fertilization to occur, you need sperm cell and an egg cell. And as we had discussed in the last video, this occurs individually. So you will have the egg cell occurring individually via oogenesis, and the production of the sperm cells occurring separately in the male body via meiosis as well, okay, in a process that we call spermatogenesis. So these occur separately, and then the sperm cell and egg cell meet up in the fallopian tube as we discussed, and the goal is to have the nucleus of the sperm cell fusing in with the nucleus of the egg cell. And so that means that you have to have gametes first, okay? So you have to produce the egg cell so that it can be fertilized by the sperm cell. So part of this menstrual cycle, we are producing egg cells, and also part of this menstrual cycle, we are thickening the endometrium in preparation for implantation. Okay, we'll talk about implantation further on in the video. Now, before we get into the actual cycle, I just wanted to finish up what I had started in the previous video. Okay, so in the previous video, I gave you guys a not so complete version of the spermatogenesis. And now that I have a complete version of it, why not discuss it with you? So spermatogenesis is simply the production of sperm cells via meiosis. So this happens in male reproductive systems, and particularly in the testes. And by the way, guys, this is meiosis. This is simply a specific type of meiosis. Okay, so how does this occur? Well, under the influence of testosterone is the hormone that is produced by the testes. We discussed that. So we're saying that under the influence of testosterone, diploid cells, which we call germinal epithelium cells. So these germinal epithelium cells, which are located in these structures inside the testes, structures which we call seminiferous cubules, they undergo meiosis to produce immature haploid sperm cells. So you have to be descriptive when you are explaining the process of spermatogenesis. Okay, ensure that you mention that you have diploid cells or diploid germinal epithelium cells that are in these structures. Okay, these are tubular structures that are in the testes, and inside of these you have these cells, okay, germinal epithelium cells. So they undergo meiosis to produce haploid sperm cells. And remember that at first you produce immature sperm cells, and then under the influence of testosterone again, okay, remember testosterone is also responsible for the maturation of sperm cells. And so after testosterone has stimulated the maturation of these immature sperm cells, then these become mature sperm cells. Okay, so that's how you describe the process of spermatogenesis. And again, ensure that you mention the important names, guys, the important pieces of information, like the type of hormone that is involved, the type of cells, the type of structures, as well as the result, which are immature haploid sperm cells. Right, so that's how spermatogenesis occurs, and then you produce sperm cells like that. Okay, we did talk about oogenesis, so if you want a description of that, you should check out the previous video. Okay, I hope that makes things better for you. Now let's get on to this menstrual cycle. Okay, so we're saying that this is a 28-day cycle, right? Now, a lot of people confuse menstruation and menstrual cycle. Now, these two guys are totally different from each other, okay? So don't confuse menstruation. Menstruation is an event that is part of, okay? So this is part of the cycle, okay? It's part of the menstrual cycle, and it's actually the first thing that occurs in the menstrual cycle, okay? Menstruation. So menstruation is when the endometrium breaks down and there's a discharge of blood due to the many blood vessels that make up the endometrium. Okay, so this is an event, guys. Okay, this is part of the menstrual cycle. Okay, so menstruation again is the removal of the endometrium tissue due to failure of fertilization. When fertilization does not occur, then menstruation results. Okay, now it's not important that you know what happens from day 1 to day 5, from day 6 to day 13. You don't have to know all of that, guys. You will just make things complicated for you. What is important is that you have to ensure that you know what happens before day 14. Okay, so the only day that is important is day 14. Okay, know what occurs before day 14. That means from day 1 to day 13. And then also know what occurs after day 14. If you treat day 14 as a day of reference, meaning that ensure that you know all the events that occur before day 14 and after day 14, you should not stress about menstrual cycle. You've got it. Right. So, first of all, as I said, guys, the purpose of this is to prepare the female body for possible pregnancy by producing egg cells. Okay. So, if we would revisit oogenesis, we said that egg cells grow inside these structures that we call follicles, right? So inside follicles, you will have cells, diploid cells that will divide by meiosis to form haploid egg cells. These are the egg cells that form, right, inside these follicles. So that means you have to first form a follicle in order to form an egg cell. And I remember that we also discussed that a follicle is formed through stimulation by FSH. Okay, so the first hormone that you should think about when you are describing menstrual cycle is the hormone FSH. Okay, so in order to produce egg cells, you need FSH that will stimulate the formation or the development of follicles. Now, during day 1, which is when FSH stimulates the development of follicles, menstruation occurs the same day. So, if we would take a look at this, by the way, I got this from Mind the Gap. Okay, so that's a very good resource, guys. But I'd advise you to not rely only on MTG, use multiple resources to supplement your knowledge. Okay, now we're saying that during the first days, okay, I'm not going to be specific that from day 1 to day 8 or day 2 to day 5. You just have to know that during the first days of the menstrual cycle, or that the beginning of menstrual cycle starts with menstruation occurring. Okay, so it starts with the endometrium breaking down, meaning which it starts with menstruation. Okay, so that's what we see. So if this is our timeline, we see menstruation as the first event that occurs on day 1. Now, while menstruation occurs during the first day of the menstrual cycle, FSH does its job of stimulating the development of follicles. Now, FSH is produced by a gland that is in the brain that we call the pituitary gland or hypophysis. You have to know what gland produces which hormone, okay? That is very important. So, we're saying that on day 1, while menstruation is occurring, the pituitary gland that is in the brain secretes a hormone that is called FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone. The follicle stimulating hormone stimulates the development of follicles. So that means it activates or it initiates the development or the growth of follicles. Okay, so follicles will grow because of FSH. Okay, so they will start growing from your primary follicle to your secondary follicle to a tertiary follicle to your Graafian follicle. So they grow from being a primary follicle to being a secondary follicle to a tertiary follicle all the way to the largest follicle, which we call the Graafian follicle. Now, these follicles become the biggest close to day 14, right? So on day 13, you should expect the Graafian follicle, right? Prior to day 13, you should expect smaller follicles like that, as we discussed. Okay, so you start from a primary follicle to a secondary to a tertiary, then to a Graafian follicle, and you would find the Graafian follicle very close to day 14. So during day 12 and day 13. Okay, and the hormone again who's growing these follicles from primary all the way to Graafian follicle is the FSH again, guys. It's responsible for the growth of these follicles. So that's the first hormone, the FSH. Now, while these follicles are growing from the primary to secondary to tertiary, they are producing another hormone. Okay, so as they are getting bigger and bigger, they are producing this second hormone that we call the estrogen. Okay, so the estrogen is produced by these follicles which are grown by the FSH. This would make estrogen an ovarian hormone. Okay, meaning which it is a hormone that is secreted by the ovary. The estrogen has a function that satisfies the second purpose of menstrual cycle. So the second purpose of menstrual cycle, we said that it is to thicken the endometrium in preparation for implantation. So the endometrium thickens so that the blastocyst is able to attach to it. Okay, so we will talk about this process again in a more detailed way. And so this purpose is first satisfied by the estrogen. Okay, so the estrogen that is produced by these follicles thickens the endometrium. Okay, so it's the first hormone to thicken the endometrium. So I hope that you are with me on this one. Again, as these follicles are growing, the estrogen is produced or secreted by these follicles, and this estrogen does the job of thickening the endometrium in preparation for a later event if fertilization does occur, which is called the implantation. Now, this is all that occurs before day 14. Okay, so you have to know all of these. Once you're able to tell the story, guys, of what happens prior to day 14, I'm telling you, you are on a good path. So all that occurs before day 14 is that the pituitary gland secretes FSH, which stimulates the development of these follicles. And then as these follicles grow from primary to secondary to tertiary to Graafian follicle, they produce their own hormone, which is called the estrogen, which does the job of thickening the uterine lining, which we call the endometrium. Okay, so that's all that happens before day 14. And then on day 14, there is a major event that occurs on this day. Okay, so day 14 is quite special, guys. We say that ovulation, the process of ovulation occurs on day 14. Okay, so now ovulation is when the egg cell, the mature egg cell, the most mature egg cell inside the follicle bursts out or is released from the follicle. Okay, so this occurs on day 14. So it's going to be released from the ovary to the fallopian tube. Okay, so the follicle will burst out, letting or releasing the egg cell. Okay, during day 14. So this process where we release the egg cell from a Graafian follicle is called ovulation, and it only occurs on day 14, guys. And we have a hormone which allows this to occur, okay, which promotes this or which activates this ovulation. And that hormone is the third hormone, which is called the LH. Okay, so the LH is responsible for stimulating, it's the one that ensures that ovulation occurs. Okay, the release of the egg cell on day 14. So LH, which is the luteinizing hormone, I'm not sure if my spelling is correct there. So this third hormone again stimulates ovulation. Okay, that is its function. It activates, or it allows, it promotes ovulation to occur. That's why you will find out that it's going to be highest during day 14. Okay, and it's also produced by the pituitary gland. So there's two hormones now so far that are produced by the pituitary gland. It is the FSH, okay, that stimulates the development of follicles, and secondly the LH that stimulates ovulation on day 14, okay? So two hormones, we call them pituitary hormones. And if we observe the production of these hormones during the whole cycle, you'll find out that FSH slightly does go up, and it's the highest on day 14 too. Now, of course, the reason why on day 1 its secretion is high is because, well, on day 1 we are developing follicles, right? And so FSH must be produced or secreted in high quantities, okay? And now the LH only is highest on day 14, okay? So on the day of ovulation, right? Because remember, we need it during that day. It has to promote, it has to stimulate the process of ovulation. That's why it has to be the highest on day 14, and then it decreases. So I need you guys to understand these graphs, be able to detect or identify which hormone produced by which gland will be highest on day 14, and how does it look like before day 14 and after day 14, as this will be examined, of course. Right, so the LH, which allows for this process of ovulation to occur, also does a second job. Okay, so it also has a second function, and the second function is to convert the ruptured follicle, or the follicle that remains after the egg cell has been removed or released. Okay, so whatever that is left, we call that the ruptured follicle. Now, the ruptured follicle is converted or transformed into another structure that we call the corpus luteum. And this transformation is done by the luteinizing hormone. Okay, so luteinizing hormone does two jobs again, guys. It stimulates ovulation, and secondly, it converts ruptured follicle into corpus luteum. Okay, so corpus luteum is a structure that you are going to get after day 14. Okay, usually it looks something like a flower or something like that. Okay, and so prior to day 14 you'll find follicles. After day 14 you find the corpus luteum. Okay, don't confuse those. So in this diagram there is your corpus luteum. There you go. And these are the follicles. This is your Graafian follicle just before day 14. That's how it looks like. The follicles, the Graafian follicle. And of course, this is the primary to secondary to tertiary, and then to the Graafian follicle, right? And then, of course, this is a process of ovulation on day 14. And so now, after day 14, we have the corpus luteum as a structure that you have in the ovary. So this structure also has a job. Okay, so it produces another hormone, the last hormone. Okay, so it produces this hormone that we call progesterone, right? So progesterone is only going to be produced after day 14 by this corpus luteum, which was converted from the ruptured follicle by the LH. Okay, be able to tell the story, guys. That's how you train your mind to understand menstrual cycle. Now, the progesterone takes the same job that estrogen has. Okay, so the progesterone and estrogen have the same job, guys. Okay, because the progesterone also thickens the endometrium, right? So it has that function as well. Because now we no longer have follicles. Okay, remember, follicles have turned into the corpus luteum. Okay, and so now we're only left with the corpus luteum. We don't have any more follicles to produce estrogen, and hence we will have progesterone and not estrogen. Okay, progesterone takes the job, or takes the shift of estrogen to thicken the endometrium. The endometrium always has to be thickened, guys. It has to be constantly thickened, okay? Or else it will break down if it is not thickened. So if for some reason the progesterone stops thickening the endometrium, then you will have the endometrium breaking down as we see there. If fertilization occurs, meaning which the nucleus of the sperm cell fuses with the nucleus of the egg cell, then the progesterone has to keep on thickening the endometrium. That means the progesterone levels cannot drop. Okay, they have to keep on being secreted so that they can continue to thicken the endometrium. Okay, remember we are preparing for the embryo embed there on the endometrium, and so the endometrium needs to be thick. Okay, and hence progesterone needs to keep on doing the job of thickening the endometrium. Okay, so once you see that the endometrium levels actually continue to rise, then you would know that fertilization occurs or fertilization has occurred. But if the progesterone levels drop, okay, as you see here, then that means fertilization did not occur. Okay, why would we keep on thickening the endometrium knowing that fertilization did not occur, knowing that there will be no embryo? Okay, so you need to be able to observe these graphs well. Okay, so progesterone will be the hormone that will tell you whether fertilization has occurred or not. Okay, you look at its levels after day 14, trace its levels. Are they continuing to rise or are they dropping? Okay, if they're continuing to rise, again, fertilization has occurred, and then if they're dropping, fertilization has not occurred. Right, so let's say now fertilization has occurred and then the progesterone levels keep on rising, right? So they will rise. If for some particular reason the progesterone levels drop, okay, even though fertilization has occurred, that means that the endometrium will break down. Okay, even if you do have an embryo that has embedded there on the endometrium, okay, so it will break down, and so that means the endometrium will break down and hence you will have a miscarriage. So I'm just preparing you guys for the types of questions that they usually ask students, okay, on the exams. Right, so ensure that you know that progesterone does maintain pregnancy, okay, as well as the placenta. We'll talk about the placenta, but it does maintain pregnancy. If these levels drop, then the endometrium will come falling down and hence miscarriage will occur if fertilization has occurred, right? But if fertilization has not occurred, of course, the progesterone will drop down and hence you will have menstruation. Right, so that is the menstrual cycle, guys. That is all that you have to know on the menstrual cycle. Know the different types of hormones and their roles. Know the functions of these hormones and the glands that produce these hormones. Know the levels of these hormones graphically, okay? So if you also take a look here, you'll find out that the estrogen, so if you take a look at ovarian, if you focus on ovarian hormone levels, you'll find out that the estrogen, yes, increases prior to day 14 and of course is highest on day 14 because of course it's produced by these follicles, and as these follicles get bigger and bigger they produce more and more estrogen, and so that's why you see the highest estrogen just on day 14. Okay, then after day 14 follicles are ruptured, okay, they are disintegrated and hence the levels of estrogen decreases while the progesterone increases because now you have converted these follicles into corpus luteum. Okay, so that's why progesterone will increase after day 14 when the corpus luteum is present. Right, so it should make sense. You should be able to analyze these graphs. Okay, everything that I've written here is everything that I've explained. So yes, we don't have to go through that again. Okay. Now let's take a look at what happens after fertilization. Okay, we have to take a look at the structures that develop during the whole pregnancy period. Now the pregnancy period is called gestation. Okay, so that's a scientific word. This is the period of development of the fetus in the uterus, and this occurs over 40 weeks. Now, we said that when fertilization occurs, the nucleus of the sperm cell has to fuse with the nucleus of the egg cell. Okay, so it's only this part that will enter through to the inside of the egg cell, right? And we talked about structures that the sperm cell has, like this front part, which is called the acrosome. Okay, so acrosome has enzymes that will digest or consume or eat out the walls, the jelly wall or the jelly layer. Okay, so the egg cell has a jelly layer on the outside, and that jelly layer is consumed by the enzymes that are in the acrosome, the front part or in the head of the sperm cell, so that the nucleus of the sperm cell is able to get the inside, okay, the egg cell. Okay, no other structure gets inside, it's only the nucleus of the sperm cell. Now, the nucleus of the sperm cell, if you remember well, in meiosis, you'll find out that gametes, okay, which are the products of meiosis, they have 23 chromosomes. Okay, each gamete, in this case the sperm cell, has 23 chromosomes inside its nucleus, and also this egg cell's nucleus has 23 chromosomes as well. Okay, now 23 chromosomes from the nucleus of the sperm cell and 23 chromosomes from the nucleus of the egg cell will form, of course, 46, a total of 46 chromosomes. Okay, in this new structure that we call the zygote. Okay, so sperm cell and egg cell, they fuse to form a zygote. Okay, so sometimes a zygote is drawn with two nuclei like that. Okay, to show that the nucleus of the sperm cell and the nucleus of the egg cell have fused together. Okay, but don't rely on that, guys. You have to observe whatever diagram that is drawn and follow the process there. Okay, you have to know where it started and follow the arrows or whatever signs they show you there. Okay, now after the zygote has formed. Now the zygote again has 46 chromosomes, which means that it is diploid. These are haploid, the gametes, right? Now after the zygote has formed, okay, and now this occurs here, guys, right? We said all of this occurs here in the fallopian tube. Here is your sperm cell fertilizing your egg cell, and then they form a zygote. Okay, so a zygote will be formed. Now, a zygote will develop as it is moving down towards the uterus. Okay, it will develop further. Okay, now the zygote develops to form a ball of cells, okay, which is called a morula. Now, how does that happen? Well, you have a zygote, okay, you had a zygote formed due to the fusion of the sperm cell's nucleus with the egg cell's nucleus. Okay, now after the zygote has formed, it divides by mitosis. Okay, so it divides by mitosis. Remember, mitosis, this is a cell division where you have a somatic cell or a body cell that will divide to form two more identical daughter cells, okay, that are identical to the parent cell, like that. Okay, so now through mitosis, you are going to form this structure, this ball of cells. Okay, so it's a structure that is made up of a ball of cells. Okay. Okay, so that's why we say it's a ball of cells. And know that it is formed via the mitosis of a zygote. Okay, so again, zygote divides by mitosis to form this ball of cells. And this ball of cells we call the morula. Okay, so morula is formed by the mitosis of a zygote, right? So that means you're going to have, at some point there in the fallopian tube, you're going to have a morula there, right, which is the ball of cells. Now the morula further divides by mitosis again. Okay, so we had that morula that formed a ball of cells. Now it's going to divide further to form, again by mitosis, to form a hollow ball of cells. Okay, I need you guys to be able to differentiate between a ball of cells and a hollow ball of cells. So a hollow ball of cells, the hollow part means that it has a hole. Okay, means that this structure has a hole there. So as you can see, that is a hole there. Okay, so these are two different structures, guys. Don't confuse these two. That's a ball of cells. This is a hollow ball of cells. And this hollow ball of cells we call a blastula or a blastocyst. Now, a blastocyst is the one that is going to implant, okay, in the uterus. Okay. It's the one that is going to implant there in the uterus, the one that's going to attach in the uterus or in the endometrium, I mean. Okay, and because it's going to implant or embed in the uterus, in the uterine lining, it forms, it has this outer layer of cells. Okay, as you can see, this outer layer of cells here. That outer layer of cells will develop into what we call the chorion. Talk about the chorion. And this structure develops finger-like projections, which will allow it to implant, okay? Allow it to attach to the endometrium. Okay, so it attaches to the endometrium with its chorionic villi. Right, so that process of attaching to the endometrium we call implantation. Okay, so this is when the blastocyst, sometimes they say the embryo, so which is what this is when the embryo, the blastocyst, attaches to the endometrium. Okay, that is what we call implantation. So again, the outer wall of the blastocyst, the chorion, develops finger-like projections called the chorionic villi, and the blastocyst embeds or attaches into the endometrium. Okay, that's a process that we call implantation. Okay, embeds with that chorionic villi, and from then from there, the cells that are inside will develop into an embryo, will develop into the fetus. It's made up of They are made up of cells, stem cells that are going to differentiate to form organs and limbs. Now, from there on, guys, what you have to know all the different types of structures that are important during the development of the fetus. Okay, that's why I have this diagram here showing all of that. The mistake we make is that we stop here at the blastocyst and we think that we are done with human reproduction. Well, you have to know all the other structures that develop after implantation. Right. So I'm just going to label from the inside, meaning which from the fetus. So this is the fetus. Now, an embryo becomes a fetus after 2 to 3 months. Okay. So that's the fetus developing there. And if you look clearly, you would find out that the fetus is actually attached, okay, to a particular structure and attached with this particular cord. Okay, so this is the fetus. Now the fetus is enclosed by this layer. Okay, so I hope that you can see this layer, right? So it's enclosed by this layer. Now this layer that encloses the fetus, we call it the amnion. So the amnion is the innermost layer that you have, and its function is that it has a fluid inside. Okay, so this fluid plays a huge role, guys. Okay, they like to ask about this fluid. Okay, so we're saying that the fetus is housed in a layer that we call the amnion. Okay, inside this layer there's a fluid, and this fluid is called the amniotic fluid. We did talk about this, we did discuss this in the reproduction invertebrates, guys, the amniotic fluid. Okay, so the amniotic fluid is this fluid that is inside this amnion. Okay, so meaning which that the fetus is floating inside a fluid. Now, this fluid plays a huge role and it has quite a number of functions, okay, that it plays. The first function that the amniotic fluid plays is that it allows free movement of the fetus. Okay, that's the first function. And then the second function is that it regulates the temperature. Okay, so that the temperature inside is not too hot or too cold. So it ensures that the temperature is always constant. Okay, the right amount of temperature for the developing fetus. Okay. The third function of the amniotic fluid is that it prevents dehydration of the fetus. And then the last function of the amniotic fluid is that it absorbs mechanical shock, okay, and hence preventing mechanical injury, okay. So I'm just going to say it prevents mechanical injury. So when it happens that, so if it happens that the belly of the mother hits something, okay, so if this is going to get struck by whatever force, this fluid inside absorbs that force so that it does not affect the developing fetus. Okay, so that's what we mean by preventing mechanical injury. So saying that the amniotic fluid absorbs the mechanical shock, in that way it will prevent the injury, the physical injury of the fetus. Now remember those chorionic villi that we talked about, okay? These ones that the blastocyst used to attach to the endometrium, these chorionic villi. Okay, so those are actually present here as well. So the chorionic villi here are these structures. Okay, so these are the chorionic villi. Okay, so as you can see, they are embedded into the endometrium. Okay, so that is the endometrium over there. Okay, that's the endometrium. And so I'm just going to label those as well. So that is the chorionic villi. Now, the chorionic villi, along with the endometrium, both of these, okay, they form a structure, a very important structure that we call the placenta. Okay. So all of these tissues, okay, the maternal tissue and the fetal tissue here, they all form along with the chorionic villi and the endometrium, they all form the placenta. Now, a placenta has functions as well that are very important. Okay, so the placenta is simply the exchange structure between the mother and the fetus. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, nutrients will be passed on from the mother to the fetus via the placenta, from the fetus to the mother via the placenta. So the exchange of nutrients or substances will be via this structure, which is the placenta. Okay, so the placenta has a job of allowing the exchange of nutrients, the exchange of waste, the exchange of gases. Every substance moves through the placenta and from the mother to the fetus, from the fetus to the mother. Okay, so it's a structure that allows the transfer of substances between the developing fetus and the mother. Okay, that's the placenta. The placenta does not allow everything, every little substance to pass through. Okay, so we say that it is a microfilter. That is its second function. Okay, so by this, what do we mean? Well, it does not allow very small substances to go through. Okay, substances such as viruses, bacteria. Okay, so those are the functions of the placenta. Now, all the substances move from the placenta into this particular cord right here. Okay, so this cord right here actually transports these nutrients or waste from the fetus to the placenta, from the placenta to the fetus. Okay, and you have to know its name. So this is the umbilical cord, guys. Okay, this whole structure that is red is the umbilical. It's the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord has two blood vessels inside it. Two types. Okay, let me rather say two types of blood vessels. So it has, first of all, two umbilical arteries. Okay, two umbilical arteries. Now, these arteries are colored in red and yellow, as you can see here. Okay, it's two of them. Okay, yellow and red, yellow, red, so on and so on. So these are two of them, and they are, as you can see, surrounding this one other blood type of blood vessel. So it has two umbilical arteries, and these umbilical arteries have a function of transporting substances. They transfer substances from the fetus to the mother. Okay, to the mother. So they basically take from the fetus, that is, they take from the fetus the substances such as waste. Okay, so they will collect waste from the fetus. They will also collect gases such as carbon dioxide. So we say that they remove or they transport deoxygenated blood. Okay, so if it's deoxygenated, then it must be filled or must be full of carbon dioxide. So that's what they take from the fetus to the mother. Okay, the waste and deoxygenated blood. Now, we also have this other blood vessel, okay, that is in white. So this blood vessel, it's one, there's one of it. This blood vessel is called the umbilical vein. Now, the umbilical vein takes from the mother to the fetus. So it transfers from the mother to the fetus, whereas these two arteries transfer from the fetus to the mother. Okay, so be able to tell the difference between those two, guys, right? So that means that it transports substances such as nutrients. Okay, so it transports nutrients from the mother to the fetus, also transports oxygenated blood. That means it's going to transport oxygen towards the fetus. And so, all in all, there are three types of blood vessels. Two of them are umbilical arteries, and one of them is the umbilical vein. Okay, so be able, guys, to differentiate between those two. Now, of course, the outside part of this, everything is housed by the uterus. Okay, there's also the chorion. So chorion is should be there. So the chorion is a layer that is outermost layer. Okay, but again, guys, I've detailed everything that is important when it comes to the development of the fetus after fertilization. Ensure that you are able to label this diagram. Ensure that you are able to give all of these functions. In doing that, you will master human reproduction. Okay, so that is all that I have for you guys today. I know that there's a lot of students that have been having a lot of requests, and I will attend to those, guys. Okay, you don't have to stress. Right, so please keep on sharing, keep on subscribing, invite more people to like this channel so that we can bring help towards many students. I've had requests of genetics and evolution. Okay, there's also been requests of the human nervous system and endocrine system. So again, I will attend to those as soon as I can. Okay, now thank you for watching. I really appreciate your support and interaction that I see in the comments. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being part of this great family. that will produce a community of excellent students. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next episode.